Let this be a reminder to you all that this organization will not tolerate failure.
The side of the federal building has been blown off, Jesse.
They believe they were part of a CIA project called MK Ultra.
Just like a segment of society that is not living in reality.
In a certain sense, we're kind of a little bit more Israel's vassal state.
There are police chiefs facilitating prostitution networks.
Do you understand? It's all in your head. It's your move.
What up, guys? How you doing? Welcome to the Morning Dump with Austin Picard from the Underclass Podcast. Oh, man. Well, we've had another interesting weekend, that's for sure. Super Bowl Sunday, another occult ritual. It didn't seem, it was still symbolic, but, you had the Freemasonry aspects playing into the checkered floors and things of that nature. But, I just find it interesting and kind of funny that anyone would believe, and they were referencing it as some sort of revolutionary halftime performance, as if, I had seen people kind of putting it in the terms of, how could you, from inside of the establishment through a multi-million-dollar production on the Super Bowl stage during halftime, stage some sort of, actual, genuine and authentic revolution of any kind. It's just laughable. But anyway, beyond that, we did have a few notable moments that occurred. Like, for example, I did enjoy Kanye West's ad that ran during the Super Bowl. That was hilarious, I have to say. And to say also, I pulled up just a brief article because it's kind of hilarious how it kind of came to fruition as far as whenever, because clearly Shopify was not aware that he was going to direct everyone to Yeezy.com, which of course uses Shopify through the purchasing process. And before the ad ran, well, leading up to the ad running, and then a few moments afterward, I think it was within 20 minutes after the ad ran, there was actually apparently he pulled everything down from Easy.com and left only a t-shirt with a black swastika, which that is the very least hilarious and very entertaining. So but hey, yo, what's going on, everybody? I need to remember good morning. Hey, say what now? That is so funny, right? Like, I can't help it. I had to just take a brief moment to enjoy the entertainment value at the very least. And so but yeah, let's watch the ad real quick and then read the brief article, and then we'll get into some real, like, actual news that's worthy of note and has a real impact on the world stage. But I figured we could start with something a little more entertaining and fun to get the show popped off and kind of ease our way into the morning. I'm tired, man, I'll be honest. But oh, by the way, guys, I went on Nephilim Death Squad yesterday with the homies Top Lobster and Raven David El Corbo, and we had a good conversation, man. I really enjoyed it. I was supposed to talk about the Delphi murders, but of course it's kind of in the nature of the show as well to just kind of have a more open and flowing conversation. But yeah, I will say I kind of derailed it a few times and rambled on, but I do think it was a worthwhile conversation, and we had a good time, and we'll be doing that more often. That's for damn sure. So check out that conversation that we had. And if you're interested and still haven't listened to the Delphi Murders episode that I have done recently from The Real True Detective, again, forewarning, if the first hour is, real detailed accounts of horrific child abuse. So if you need to kind of fast forward to an hour in, an hour, 5 minutes in, then you can really get into the Delphi murders where I introduce it and transition for the rest of the episode. But it's worthwhile as well because I definitely got into far more detail. Um, but yeah, on that note, I am desperately and passionately working on my next solo project, which is it's in the workshop right now, and it's definitely, I've kind of teased a few different ideas. I originally was thinking. I had settled on the or not the the Fort Bragg murders, the Jeffrey McDonald case, but then for some odd reason, I was questioning, only because I usually go in to my process with a couple of different ideas that I'm workshopping and then see what I come out with on the other end. And this time I kind of went in with a few different ideas in mind, and one of them being the Fort Bragg murders. The other was, of course, North Fox Island, which has been on the short list for some time. But what's up, brother? The real D Ford said, "Sup, Austin? Ye does all this J shit and doesn't care to mention Gaza." Yeah, I know, I know. It's par for the course. Honestly, I don't believe. I have to say, man, like as much as I enjoy the entertainment value of what Kanye does, he is very clearly. I think having Shane Cashman on was an eye-opening episode for me. Hearing him explain Kanye West is dead, but yeah, Cloudhound, no doubt. It is genius in a way to get your name in the circulation of the of just the public spotlight. It is some sort of, at the very least, it is you know it's definitely extraordinary PR, right? And so that is something that I feel like should at least be recognized, even though it's nothing that should be, I think, celebrated. But still, I do believe that anyone at that level is very clearly compromised to some degree, and yeah, after talking with Shane Cashman and then remembering Jim Brewer make that statement to Roseanne about Dave Chappelle being visited, and then him saying that once Chappelle returned home from after his hiatus, right, after he had that falling out in Hollywood and rejected all those millions of dollars, goes to Africa or something, and then he returns, and Jim Brewer was honestly questioning if that was truly Dave Chappelle, and as if he was visited and potentially duplicated in some clone like fashion. It's a possibility, as much as it sounds absolutely extraordinarily insane and schizophrenic to even suggest. I do think that just the level of influence for a lot of these celebrity figures, just their created personalities alone, they have such just significant influence on the global population, especially the just the domestic class, right? The peasant class, really the serfdom, just kind of groveling at the feet of the celebrity class who they really worship. And that was kind of something that we talked just briefly about on NDS yesterday, because there is this kind of fundamental philosophical disadvantage that it seems like so many of us. I'm guilty of that. Growing up, I was very much seduced by Hollywood, and so I was idolizing, you know, different characteristics and qualities of individuals who, I mean, you should never put on some sort of ethical platform, such as I mean, I was idolizing the Forever 27 Club, so how is that gonna turn out as far as your own, life's journey and your own individual path? So, I mean, it clearly is some sort of, degradation, a process of degradation and demoralization, and we fall very easily into that trap, which makes all the sense in the world the way society has been structured for so long. So the social engineering, they say Hollywood is downstream from politics. Yeah, I think culture is downstream from the intelligence community. Like that's basically what it seems like, right? So that's man, unfortunately, that's my impression at this point, and it's very difficult to see any other possibility considering the the impact of modern Mockingbird, and just the fact that clearly Mockingbird never ended, as did MK Ultra, or any of these other clandestine operations that go deep underground, and they have to maintain the plausible deniability, and so it's very often just directed elsewhere and exploited in the private sector, which happens so very often. But yeah, politics and culture are both downstream from power. Absolutely screwed up Texas. What's up, retards? Bobo McHua Hua McHua. All right. What's up, guys? I hope you guys are having a good morning, man. Yeah, I've been losing my damn mind over here reading about, my God, just more connections to the process church, the final judgment, involved in, let's say, international heroin trafficking during the Vietnam War. I mean, it's like how many, clearly it's more than that, because you still have these fertility death rituals that were being conducted by the members of the process, who were directly involved in the trafficking and distribution of the heroin at the time, but from military bases in the U.S. But that's kind of what I've been reading about, is how essentially drugs were placed in the body in the body cavities of American GIs in plastic bags after the autopsy in Vietnam, and before the bodies were placed on the airplanes, and the bodies were then sewn up and shipped to various U.S. Army air bases in the U.S., including the air base at Fort Bragg. And apparently, those who handled the bodies in Vietnam and the U.S. were Army personnel. So we're talking CID as well. So you have Army military police directly involved in this trafficking operation on military bases, which are then kind of uh, what they're doing is leveraging the local police departments as well, which truly doesn't seem to be a difficult task, especially considering how the lucrative nature of these trafficking operations. Once they're compartmentalized to such an extent, then it's really just about having the assets in place. And so yeah, it's very, the level of representation as far as local police involved in these operations. Yeah, it's significant as well. So, and allegedly a lot of these drugs at the time were coming from Thailand, but yeah, it's going to be a very interesting episode. I think you guys will enjoy it, because it falls perfectly in place with Danny Kessler's Octopus. What else? Iran Contra, in in every way, right? And then just the tie-in directly to the process, which I don't want to, kind of uh, bury that lead, or honestly, it's a smoking gun in many ways that I've found. So I'll kind of leave that for more of an exciting surprise during the episode. But yeah, I think you guys will enjoy it. And so I'll be trying to get that finished by the end of this week. But beyond that, guys, let's actually watch this hilarious ad that Kanye put out during the Super Bowl, and then we'll move on, transition into Ceasefire Sabotage, right? So let me share this. There we go.
What's up, guys? I spent like all the money for the commercial on these new teeth. So once again, I had to shoot it on the iPhone. Go to Yeezy.com. What's up?
It's so stupid. This is the world we're living in. And of course, this 20 minutes after the ad dropped, this is what was on Yeezy.com as the only available item to purchase, which is just absolutely ridiculous. But the entire site was scrubbed after he promoted the site, and only that one product was available. So again, it's absolutely ridiculous, but something that I thought would be funny to start the show with. But yeah, so let's yeah. Yeah, what the fuck? For sure. This is just man, I honestly think that Kanye is I mean, knowing the Harvey Pasternak connection there, right? And the just the military intelligence level of psychological control and manipulation and I'll never forget that text that he sent him, right? Playtime with the kids will never be the same. Send him back to zombie land. Um, yeah, these celebrities are very much handled. So even when we're meant to be under this misconception that they're unbridled and they're out here causing chaos, um, yeah, I just think that's kind of par for the course within the realm of the context of the culture war. But it's definitely confirming the bias of many people who are under this impression that we have nothing more to worry about than the number one priority of anti-Semitism and racism in America. And oh my God, look at the hate that is spreading. You see the ridiculous Marxist propaganda that is just oversaturating the mainstream media networks and CBS and all these different Fox and every single television network that is of any real significance. They are continuing on with this Marxist propaganda. So, we'll see how much that changes during the Trump administration, but it does definitely seem to have shifted in many ways, but it definitely has not ceased to exist, no doubt. So, um, yeah, it does seem like potentially a Jewish gimmick behind him hyping the swastika because it again, of course, what does it do? It naturally provokes a sense of sympathy, really, and then also props up the notion of anti-Semitic, right? Um, just the sort of the visceral nature of the anti-Semitism that is being kind of leveraged against anyone who tends to dissent against the war in Gaza or just the plight of the Palestinians or just the conflicts in the Middle East. I mean, or just international proxy wars. I mean, whatever the case may be, it's clearly being leveraged against any anti-war voice. So despite your underlying intention, that's never even really considered because the true purpose, I believe, is just to discredit this line of dissent, right? And so I do agree with you, PJR. This is definitely, it's seemingly some sort of Jewish gimmick, hyping the swastika and hyping the anti-Semitic nature of look, even Kanye West hates Jews, which is just, in the midst of such an ongoing, brutal, sadistic conflict playing out in Gaza. Yeah, I mean, it's only natural for actual honest anti-Semitism to kind of crop its head up in these moments because it's almost a natural reaction to a lot of these policies. It's just as during the terror wars. I mean, it's very similar how Ron Paul would explain blowback, right, and the nature of blowback, and so as much as I believe that the vast majority of the most significant crises that have occurred and have been labeled as a sort of consequence and inevitable result of our foreign policy. I do kind of believe that there's, of course, genuine truth to that, you know, to that concept, but it's a legitimate concept, no doubt. But I do believe that there are many more manufactured crises by clearly the deep state, which whatever you believe that consists of. I clearly believe there are many different NGOs that are completely in bed with the intelligence community, and that has been by design from day one. And it is this mechanism of plausible deniability playing out in the private sector, and so it's just another tool, right, in setting up this international private intelligence apparatus, right, which truly does, it crosses international boundaries, right, it crosses these just inherently, and it allows for these tactics of destabilization, and so let's see. Hey, say what now says, did you hear about Christian Bale starting foster care homes compound? I always used to like him, but who really knows what actually goes on there or going on there? Just makes me think of Boys Town. Similar story. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Um, I appreciate you, FFS. When Austin does these, I watch. Thank you, my friend. And man, it's funny that, I mean, it's not funny. Hey, say what now that you say this, but man, I'm starting to really concern myself with. There are just, for example, St. John's in the Jacob Wetterling case that involved the paperboy fetishes that were happening in the context of Johnny Gosh in North Fox Island. It's and that's the Spartacus network as well. It is terrifying to realize that you have these, Catholic Church organizations like St. John's, institutions, and they're, you know, not only are they abducting children for purposes of child trafficking, for child sex trafficking, right? So, but not only that, we're talking actual, ritualistic blood sacrifice, which that is being, you know, offered by many of these clandestine underground pedophile organizations that will have um, they have an enterprise in place, right? And essentially, pedophiles will pay this a subscription model, okay, and they will legitimately give a nonprofit organization that has been set up as a cutout. They will give them a certain amount of money depending on which threshold of the subscription model they intend to utilize for their own sadistic pleasure, and and each of these levels of the subscription model, of course, offer more and more sadistic opportunities, and so it's just it's absolutely horrifying how many of these institutions are complicit in kind of really just the procurement of children, right? And the most vulnerable among us. So I think that I'll pull up here in a moment because I'm actually prepared to have a conversation about the a little bit more about the Spartacus network and about Jacob Wetterling, because there's this thing called it's an article I found called Project Ambition that was talking about this journalist who had done significant work exposing a lot of uh, well, seemingly well organized and well established networks of abuse in Minnesota, I believe, and they had been targeted by members of the establishment and local police and feds who were clearly complicit within the network. and had been attempting to entirely discredit, if not threaten, the journalist himself, who then reached out to Detective James Rothstein, who's known who's known apparently as Jimmy Boots, and I was unaware of that. But it gets very interesting as far as the context of that article. So we'll get into that right after uh, I finally go through this brief article about how Kanye was selling swastika T-shirts at $20 a pop. So, but then we'll finish that disgusting, terrible conversation about the Spartacus Network. But it is worthwhile, and it will be within one of my solo projects in the near future, because I think the level of, man, just I was very unaware of just how well established the enterprises have become in regard to not only child pornography but snuff films, and legitimate child hunting parties that resemble exactly what was happening in the Dutroux network, and that was happening in America, and still is, clearly. We're just unaware, and it's not in the public spotlight, and I hope we can only hope that one day, more and more of these networks will be revealed. But until that time, we'll do our best to just spotlight them as they come and as we discover them, and only that is the only way, right? Is to kind of introduce the concept alone to as many people as possible. It's I don't enjoy the level of detail I must consume in regard to understanding, the depth and breadth and honestly the scope of a lot of these networks of abuse. So, but it's the only way, if we are to truly attempt to understand the threat being posed, and right, understand the true threat facing a global society, and also, yeah, abolish foster care for sure. I just, I see it as institutionalized child procurement at this point. um but yeah, so let's check this out. Oh, and by the way, don't let me forget, say what now, about this Eric Wright. Is that his name? Let me find it. I have it here. Evan Wright. So he's an author and a journalist, and he wrote the book Generation Kill, about the global war on terror and the Iraq War, the original Iraq wars, and well, not Iraq War One, but Iraq War Two, as Scott Horton says. So not Desert Storm, but yes. Anyway, Evan Wright, we'll get into a short thread about him as well, because it does seem as if, as he became willing to speak on he's really a long time, lifelong career asset of the CIA, is what it boils down to, in the intelligence community. But he also did expose he did some very interesting journalism, exposing some um, you know some true spook activity, right, and clandestine operators. But he then becomes willing to have a conversation about how he was abused as a child psychologically in one of these institutions, right? The Seed. And we'll get into that, because seemingly he was potentially, maybe he did commit suicide, but yeah, he died recently, and I think it's something worth mentioning as well, in some detail. But so yeah, let's check out how Kanye West sold these swastika T-shirts. So Kanye's Yeezy.com advertisement during Sunday night's Super Bowl stunned viewers with its bizarre vibe. But then I was laughing so hard when I saw it. but but then what happened next shocked the station execs who ran it and media buyers who approved the spot even more. West immediately flipped the website after the ad aired, replacing its previous content with just one item: a swastika T-shirt for sale at $20 each. Up until the ad actually ran, the Yeezy.com website featured a Shopify-powered store selection of various non-branded articles of clothing like shirts, pants and jackets, nothing that would have been deemed a content issue. And Variety can confirm, because this reporter immediately checked the site after the spot aired in Los Angeles, that when the ad first ran, the swastika t-shirt wasn't there. Here's an example of the before and after. That's so funny, man. Oh my God. So within the hour of the ad airing in Los Angeles and other markets, West made the switch, and users saw just that $20 white t-shirt with a swastika on it. At that point, the on-air ad had already run, and it was too late. According to insiders, the Yeezy.com ad went through legal approval and moved forward because there was no standards issue with the 30-second spot itself. It's simply a low-budget ad shot on an iPhone with Wes sitting in what appears to be a dentist chair while stammering. So what's up, guys? I spent like all the money for the commercial on these new teeth. Dude, oh my God. The ad ran on 3 Fox-owned stations, including KTTV Los Angeles, and may have been seen in a few more local markets. It's not the first time West had purchased a local spot during the Super Bowl, as one was seen on at least one small market CBS affiliate in 2024, but that one aired without any incident. There had been plenty of red flags that selling an ad to West might be a problem. The hip-hop star has proclaimed himself to be a Nazi, and his X account has been deactivated after spending several days posting racist and anti-Semitic comments, from declaring "I'm a Nazi" to calling Hitler so fresh. Despite those recent outbursts on social media, the Yeezy spot moved forward by perhaps falling a bit through the cracks, since it was a one-off spot sold to a handful of local markets. Most of those ads are for local businesses like law firms and car dealerships. In LA, the ad that ran after the Yeezy spot was for the California lottery. So if it's not flagged for standards and practices, it winds up making its way to air. So fresh. As a result, West Spot didn't get the scrutiny that comes with big national Super Bowl buys. And since the ad didn't include any questionable content, and at that moment, the website didn't include the swastika t-shirt, once it passed muster with legal, it was likely thrown into the local ad rotation without much more thought on or visibility. All right, well, that makes sense. It's kind of hilarious, though, and in no way a shocking. You know what I'm saying? Hold on, Jose. What's up, brother? Fun fact: Ye has had the same personal trainer as Brittany Murphy and her husband, both of which died of pneumonia. Yeah. That Brittany Murphy death is very, very strange. Um, I'm trying to. I'll have to pull up the details of that at some point, because it would be worthwhile, honestly. And what's his name? Yeah, fun fact. Also, you're gay if you don't hit the like button. Oh man, yeah, Harvey Pasternak, man. Definitely. I think that no way is it shocking. That he tends to be, in that class of celebrity assets that are being very clearly directed and handled. And I think it was, I believe it was Boltzmann Booty on Twitter that had referenced Elon Musk, Jay-Z, Eric Adams, and Mr. Beast all sharing a lawyer that did a fellowship at the CIA during his legal training. And yeah, it's just not at all surprising that you have these kind of overlapping threads connecting each other, when you really consider the direct influence involved with a lot of these creative personalities. But yeah, other than that, I think we're done talking about Kanye, honestly. But yeah, meanwhile, I found out about this 2012 article talking about how hundreds of African children were being trafficked to the UK by African witch doctors for blood rituals in the UK. So apparently that was happening, and that was published, like, I believe, either a week or 2 weeks before, or shit, I think it was before Jimmy Savile died, though. But either way, it was very strange, the timing of it. And and I felt like it was something that, I should bring to the table as well, because I could not believe the level of really established involvement in regard to, we're talking African witch doctors essentially using MK Ultra techniques on young children, abducting them, and then either harnessing their blood for blood rituals and then offering them to any sort of customer that comes in the shop, asking for, apparently this is a commonplace in many ways, and before it was exposed, and it's still being apparently exploited to this day. But yeah, I had one more thing about Kanye, but it's not even worthwhile, honestly. So before I forget, it is kind of hilarious that Gavin Newsom, and this is um Charlie Robinson, by the way. He said, "I told you this would happen." And watch Gavin Newsom talking about rebuilding in California after post fire, right? And this was just like 4 days ago or something. It wasn't very long ago, but it's kind of, again, it just more of corroborating evidence that this was a by design, right, and a manufactured crises to exploit within the context of what seemingly is the 15-minute infrastructure for the new smart cities. And so I think I put it in the context talking to a buddy actually the other night who had asked me about my opinion on some of these executive orders and things, and I had essentially said that I'm remaining permanently skeptical, anticipating the next move toward the totalitarian technocratic state, and that truly is how I feel in more ways than one. But a lot of the executive orders are seeming to kind of create this illusion of change in the public perception while never addressing any root cause, yet sort of generating this public support necessary on both sides of the political divide to pull off the ultimate bait and switch. And so replacing the current system with the ideal social credit model tied in with the WEF's World Economic Forum's 15-minute smart city biometric AI public health system infrastructure, complete with Minority Report dystopian style pre-crime laws. That is what I'm concerned about. And that is in no way a black pill, considering how legitimate that threat seems to be in this very moment. And it feels like all of the pieces are in place for that to effectively be achieved. And that is why I am a little bit concerned in regards to that agenda and those benchmarks. And so I think we should, at the very least, remain open-minded and very much, you know, just again, remain skeptical. I think that is really the bottom line.
You previously mentioned the timeline for rebuilding would be 6 to 9 months. Is that going to happen? And should people rebuild in some parts of California, given how high the fire risk
Yeah,
is?
you can't rebuild the same. So we have to rebuild with science. We have to build with climate reality in mind. We have to look at infrastructure, redundancy systems, ingress, egress as it relates to emergency management and planning, materials, all of that is being reviewed and reconsidered, and with the latest iterations in terms of understanding and technology. And I say technology in the context of how, again, we build the infrastructure to keep it safe, to address undergrounding of lines, how we address the larger issues of redundancy in terms of systems. But more important than anything else is the need to get the debris removed. 30 days to do the hazardous waste. We want to get 6 to 9 months, the rest of the debris done. Concurrently, people are getting permits. So this is all happening, rolling together, and we want to see construction very shortly. And in the next few years, we want to see hundreds, thousands of homes rebuilt.
But I think there's a big question about how do some Californians do that, right? You have State Farm announcing that it has an average 22% interim rate hike for homeowners.
Which, by the way, I don't remember if I mentioned the fact that it's no way in my mind that it was a coincidence as far as whenever the fires took place and SoFi rescheduled the playoff game, right? SoFi Stadium for the Rams. the LA Rams, and they had moved the game to Arizona, to State Farm Stadium, right? And so during the time that State Farm's canceling all their insurance policies on the fire victims, they're benefiting solely from the playoff game being moved to their stadium. And so I just think that these things don't happen by accident, right? So
The fair insurance plan for the state is just bogged down right now. Your dad, I believe, is on that plan, if I recall. People, Californians, were saying they're not getting the help they need from fair. It's
oh shit. Britney Spears, Martin Lawrence, Amanda Bynes, all the actors that went crazy were all trained by Harley Pasternak. It's Harley, isn't it? I kept saying Harvey. I don't know. Is it Harley? I can't even remember at this point. I'll pull him up here in a minute.
really confusing.
Well, FAIR's not a state plan. It's not a taxpayer-funded plan. It's a syndicate pool run by the insurance market itself. And it's the insurer of last resort. And it's existed back to Ronald Reagan in 1968. As it relates to that plan and their exposure, they have reinsurance, a significant amount of reinsurance. We feel strongly at this moment, and again, this changes in real time, that the plan will be able to absorb the losses ultimately. Now, as it relates to the larger issue of the insurance market, not unique to California by any stretch of the imagination, what's happening with insurance, and this is the reality, the new reality of extremes, extreme heat, extreme drought. You have droughts and rain bombs. You have flooding at the same time you're dealing with droughts, all happening concurrently. There's a new reality, the world we're living in. And if you're not believing science, you have to believe your own eyes, your own lived experience. And the reality is the insurance market understands it better than anyone else. The market and Mother Nature's are going to have to change the way we live and do business in the context of how we plan, how we do land use, zoning into the future along the lines of your question. We have to wake up to this reality. We cannot be in denial about what's going on with Mother Nature, again, around the globe, not just
just to sort of pin you down, what does that mean for the rebuilding in some of these high-risk areas?
Just more sophisticated design and planning. Remember, Altadena, many of those homes were done in the 20s and 30s and 40s for a world that no longer exists from a climate perspective. And so the ability to absorb a deeper understanding as you rebuild it presents itself anew in a profound and we hope impactful way. So I'm concerned about it, but I'm not concerned about our resourcefulness to address it with the most modern standards anywhere in the world. By the way, California leads the nation already in building zoning standards. Our ability now to take it to the next level, to be a model for the rest of the country, presents itself.
Yep. Klaus Schwab's vision for Los Angeles 2028. Everyone prepare yourselves. Again, this is a perfect example of how the Los Angeles fires were ultimately a land grab opportunity and also provided really when you have to consider the lithium deposits that were discovered that are very clearly being exploited, it's just so difficult. It's so difficult for me to believe that that was all by accident. But, it's still, I felt like that was something worthwhile to bring to the table, especially considering our coverage on the LA fires and Newsom himself and that the World Economic Forum's vision for the future here in the 15-minute smart city infrastructure. So you pair that with, the new AI infrastructure, the $500 billion that was planned as far as, Larry Ellison and Altman and all these, Illuminati confirmed lizard people who are essentially staging the dystopian future as far as the totalitarian technocratic state is concerned. They're all strategically in place. I believe even, I think it was Peter Thiel. I think his magazine is, I believe his magazine is actually sitting like running publication or like running articles, bolstering Trump's Gaza plan and the ethnic cleansing approach. So it's very much, in play as far as this dystopian reality. And again, something we need to very much be aware of at all times. And so, by the way, did you guys realize that there was this thread about Obama's mother, Stanley Ann Dunham, being a consultant at USAID? And I didn't even realize that that was, you know, I mean, I knew that Obama's family had some strange ties, but definitely did not realize that Obama's mother was potentially involved in USAID. And so it is kind of hilarious that with the level of spook background connected to Obama and his rise to power from absolutely out of nowhere, it it perfectly falls in line with him being a manufactured asset. And so, yeah, I thought this thread was hilarious because it just goes in and discusses a few of the details about some of the usual suspects and prominent individuals that were in positions of power in the USAID over the course of its existence. And from 1981 to 1984, Obama's mother, Stanley Ann Dunham, worked as program officer for women in employment, Ford Foundation Regional Office for Southeast Asia, Jakarta. Interesting. So again, just more, prominent individuals connecting or connected into this sort of private clandestine infrastructure, that very much seems to, I would say, influence policy on the world stage very often, right? And more than that, right? Not even influencing policy, staging color revolutions, as we know. So, but yeah, before I forget, we should definitely at least discuss the ceasefire sabotage that has been happening in regard to Gaza, right? And the hostages and the hostage negotiations, allegedly, which, yeah, very much seem as if they have been designed to fail, right? And so Obama FFS says Obama's nanny was trans and recently gave an interview. Hilarious. JMS, yo, what's up, troopers? What's up, my friend? JMS, Obama is African American president, and so is Elon Musk. Don't let the pendulum swing fool you. All globalists are Bolshevik. Absolutely. We are surrounded by Bolsheviks. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that the perceived pendulum shift is truly just, placating the revolutionary class, right? In an attempt to, and there's really no threat in my mind as far as domestically in the U.S. We pose no threat to the establishment and, the true political class, or, well, power brokers, I would say, behind the political class. We pose no real threat. And so they'll crucify their political puppets here and there for to give us some sort of semblance of a victory. And most of us will embrace it as genuine authenticity, and as if we are ultimately not remaining on the same path toward the same outcome, which has been, manufactured by design. So, Trump, of course, is saying that if all hostages not released by Saturday, Gaza ceasefire should be canceled. He says, let all hell break loose. Israel can override it. So I pulled up a few different articles that we can talk about in order to kind of explain this method of sabotaging these negotiations of any kind, which really the ceasefire was violated by the Israelis anyway. And so it goes without saying that Netanyahu really seemingly intended on sabotaging the ceasefire deal, which was actually reported on antiwar.com. And then inevitably, just after Netanyahu's meeting with Trump, he goes out and makes these public statements about essentially, no right of return and a policy of ethnic cleansing. So, yeah, Israel also has ramped up attacks on the West Bank, no doubt. And there also, by the way, I read this article about this open fire order. And of course, the great Dave DeCamp is just murdering it, doing amazing work, exposing, the corrupt foreign policy of the United States and of course, U.S. State Department and again, USAID wasn't the only non-governmental organization being leveraged against just the international community at large. So Israel expands open fire order in West Bank, resulting in surge of civilian killings. The Israeli military is also using Palestinian civilians in the West Bank as human shields by making them check buildings for explosives. The Israeli military command overseeing operations in the occupied West Bank has expanded its open fire orders, leading to a surge in the killing of Palestinian civilians by IDF troops, Haaretz reported on Monday. One of the orders allows Israeli troops to fire on unarmed Palestinians if they're messing with the ground. The claim is that this order is necessary to prevent explosives from being planted, but sources told Haaretz it has made soldiers trigger happy, which, by the way, I think Trump actually greenlit the Moabs to be sent to Israel, which essentially they behave as the aftermath and the after effect is resembles that of napalm, is what I was reading, and so I believe it's a sort of scorched earth tactic. I'm not quite certain of the details, but that was kind of along the lines of what I was reading in context. So, but the other order allows Israeli troops to open fire on any vehicles approaching Israeli military checkpoints that are leaving combat zones to force them to stop. Since the combat zones are residential areas, this means the IDF can open fire on civilians trying to flee. These orders led to the killing of a husband and his wife, Sundus Shalabi, who was 8 months pregnant. Initial reports said Shalabi's husband was critically injured by the Israeli military attack. Haaretz said he was shot dead. Sources told Haaretz that the husband was shot and killed while driving near Tulkarm, and Shalabi was shot dead after managing to get out of the car. According to an IDF investigation, Shalabi was shot because she looked suspiciously at the ground. No weapons or explosives were found in the car, which was carrying their 2 children. Palestinian officials said paramedics couldn't attempt to save Shalabi's unborn baby because IDF troops blocked the ambulance. Yeah, it is really, as much as it seems like we've been desensitized, it's kind of just extraordinary what is really playing out on the world stage right now. But there have been many other incidents of civilian deaths in the Israeli military's current operation in the West Bank, dubbed Iron Wall. Yeah, she looked suspiciously at the ground. That's fucking so crazy. Which was launched on January 21st. In one incident, IDF troops shot a 2-year-old girl in the head while she was inside a house eating dinner with her family. On Saturday, Saddam Hussein Iyad Rajab, 7-year-old boy, hell of a name, died of wounds he sustained by Israeli gunfire 10 days earlier. The boy was shot over the claim that he was messing with the ground. What the fuck, man? The Haaretz report also revealed the Israeli military has been using Palestinian civilians as human shields to check for explosives inside buildings, a practice that became common in Gaza. The report said another Palestinian woman, 21-year-old Rahaf al-Ashkar, was killed on Sunday by an explosive charge placed at the entrance of her home that was placed by the IDF. The Israeli troops placed the explosive charge after they ordered anyone inside to leave over claims a terrorist was inside. The explosive was set off when al-Ashkar opened the door. The Haaretz report said that after the explosion, The Israeli soldiers selected at random a resident of the refugee camp to check the scene and make sure that no other explosive charge had been placed that the soldiers were unaware of. Human shields once again. So I figured, of course, the great one and only Ron Paul, he had a strong statement against Trump's plan to resettle the Palestinians and occupy Gaza. But first I should probably just point to Trump's own statements, which I have a few pulled up. They aren't very long. One of them being very worthwhile, though, because this is actually not in direct correlation or connection to the current Gaza crisis happening, but well, it really very much is, though, at the same time. So check out old Donald Trump talking at AIPAC, or the IIC, Israeli American Council. All right, and listen to these strong statements about his support for Miriam Adelson and moving the capital as well. It just goes to prove, his clear and utter allegiance and loyalty to Israel, right? And the policies, really, it's Israel first, and that is very obvious.
Just as I promised, I recognized Israel's eternal capital and opened the American embassy in Jerusalem. Jerusalem became the capital. I also recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Miriam and Sheldon would come into the White House
shooting.
probably almost more than anybody outside of people that work there.
Well, that's disturbing.
And they were always after, and as soon as I'd give them something, always for Israel. As soon as I'd give them something, they'd want something else. I said, give me a couple of weeks, will you please? But I gave them the Golan Heights, and they never even asked for it. For 72 years, they've been trying to do the Golan Heights, right? And even Sheldon didn't have the nerve. But I said, you know what? I said to David Friedman, give me a quick lesson, like 5 minutes or less on the Golan Heights. And he did. And I said, let's do it. We got it done in about 15 minutes, right?
Yeah. Man, it is just ridiculous that the statements like that can be made by a president and no one bats an eye anymore. I mean, if the USS Liberty didn't already make right the statement necessary to understand Israel's role in American policy, yeah, I think there's no accountability to be had. And yes, JMS says Trump, Trojan, Rothschild, underground military puppet as an acronym. And that is amazing. That's spot on. Unfortunately, it is my belief. And I think there's plenty of evidence to prove that point out, especially considering the, what was it? Royal International, Casino Royal Resorts International. What was it? I'm trying to remember the organization that was directly tied in with the Meyer Lansky criminal syndicate and directly ties in Rothschild and Rockefeller to the special interests directly, supporting Trump, who inevitably did make the statement when Trump went bankrupt and he was bailed out by Rockefeller special interests, and the Rothschilds as well played a role, that he's far more valuable alive than dead, meaning financially alive than dead, and also his name alone, right? And as far as the branding purposes and influence, and considering how popular Trump was, Celebrity Apprentice. I mean, people that I know and love, who are consumed by the partisan divide, blinded, right, by the culture war. They watched Celebrity Apprentice and loved the guy before, right? And of course, he was viewed more as a classical liberal at that time, and just another celebrity personality that had been in Home Alone, right? And so, just considering the you know, this just the significant not only influence but um, the reputation that can be exploited, right, on that domestically, as far as just we mentioned the celebrity worship being a real, inherent disadvantage culturally in the US. Well, Trump's a perfect example of why. It's like, what do you think's going to happen next? I mean, you think Elon Musk and some of these power brokers that seem to be manufactured personalities that are now seemingly, I mean, not seemingly, but holding prominent positions of power within a presidential administration, as if this isn't some sort of precedent setting moment for future administrations. I think that that's a very just it's definitely a mistake to not consider the fact that this is only the beginning, and that this this sort of opening the opportunity, the precedent setting notion involved with naming some of these individuals from the private sector that very much seem to be much more celebrity than right than just as far as what they really have to offer, right, is just their celebrity influence, right? And so, of course, Elon, I think, is he definitely doesn't fall perfectly within that concept, but I'm only using it as an example, considering the fact that you have Larry Ellison and Peter Thiel and all of these special interests surrounding Trump at this moment. It's just it goes to show that, like I said, this seems to be just the beginning as far as this private sector influence on, future presidential administrations. So, anyway, let's listen to Ron Paul and what he has to say about Donald Trump's Gaza plan. Ron Paul is just forever. He is someone that I will rewatch the his farewell speech to Congress so many times, and every time it affects me just the same emotionally. It's one of the greatest things I've ever heard in my life. But let's listen to, you know, one of really the only few political icons worthy of any real admiration over the course of the history of the U.S. Ron Paul stands as number one on that list for myself personally.
U.S. ownership of Gaza, accompanied by forcible relocation of Palestinians, would cause increased resentment of the United States. This could result in increased terror attacks against the U.S. Even if a long-term U.S. occupation of Gaza went 100% according to plan, the U.S. government, which has an over $36 trillion and growing debt, cannot afford another open-ended overseas military commitment. Instead, President Trump should follow through on his campaign rhetoric about withdrawing from unnecessary military commitments. This, not tariffs, will help make America more competitive on the international economy. The best thing the United States can do to rebuild Gaza and promote peace in the Middle East is to stop funding Israel's occupation and blockade of Gaza. Instead, the U.S. should work toward peaceful relations backed by free trade with Israel and its neighbors. Thanks for listening.
That's my guy. Ron Paul knows what's up. He will never steer you in the wrong direction. I do believe that unfortunately people definitely have a little bit too much. Well, I won't say that, because truly it's we need to appreciate all the positive policy changes and shifts in the right direction, whether the ultimate result and is as I mentioned earlier, sort of a bait and switch. It does seem that right anytime something as far as even USAID being defunded, I mean that alone is worth a moment in the sun, taking a victory lap for. But again, I think the ultimate what we must do is consistently remain skeptical of these individuals in power in prominent positions. And yeah, I believe that Thomas Massey is at least um he's at least another one of these individuals like Ron Paul that should be kind of held a little bit on a pedestal as far as their sincerity and integrity is concerned. And meanwhile, you know, I don't believe that Trump should be celebrated for, giving speeches about how he's giving Miriam Adelson and Sheldon Adelson everything they wanted without asking. That's a little bit disturbing. But meanwhile, Zelensky claims that the Ukrainian people oppose holding elections and prefer that he remains in power. So don't worry, no democratic elections in the proxy, as far as just the Ukrainian proxy conflict that we've clearly propped up as far as the U.S. State Department and uses just clearly we've just kind of when you realize the impact on Ukraine as a society, and really the devastation that has taken place there, and now it's just kind of being exploited for these rare earth minerals. It's just again not at all what I was hoping for as far as a de-escalation, but it does seem like a potential peace plan is in as far as underway, and that was I believe Ted Snyder reported this. So there's potentially a plan that contains a number of at least some negotiating tactics that seem to be at least a little bit more authentic and as far as just genuine, right, in the approach of a potential peace plan. But it does seem as if the exploitation of the rare earth minerals is definitely involved as a key component, because it's there definitely has to, as far as just how much money Ukraine's been a boondoggle of course, as far as like it's just completely been exploited, by not only the Democratic Party, but it was just a huge money laundering operation. And so they're going to keep that afloat as long as possible just to exploit it even further. But yeah, let's listen to Trump's potential plan for Gaza here, and then we'll finally pivot to our last story, which I think is far more interesting as far as at least worth talking about in regard to the St. John's and Jacob Wetterling that I was mentioning earlier. So yeah, let's listen in to old Donald Trump explaining his personal approach to Gaza.
People. We'll build beautiful communities. We'll build beautiful communities for the 1.9 million people. We'll build beautiful communities, safe communities. Could be 5, 6, could be 2, but we'll build safe communities a little bit away from where they are, where all of this danger is. In the meantime, I would own this. Think of it as a real estate development for the future. It would be a beautiful piece of
Jared
land.
Kushner's happy.
No big money spent. No, they wouldn't, because they're going to have much better housing, much better. In other words, I'm talking about building a permanent place for them, because if they have to return now, it will be years before you could ever, it's not habitable. It will be years before it could happen. I'm talking about starting to build, and I think I could make a deal with Jordan. I think I could make a deal with Egypt. We give them billions and billions of dollars a year. We'll build beautiful communities for the 1.9
Yes.
million.
So Ray says that will mean U.S. troops will be in Gaza. It's funny that you say that, because actually there is a report of U.S. troops seen in Gaza with the right to kill. So let's look at that really quickly, because it's definitely worth mentioning as well. And international mercenaries spotted in Gaza. Not really worth listening to, but definitely looks like we have troops and boots on the ground already. And apparently, according to this report, nearly 100 U.S. Special Forces from UG Solutions are stationed in Gaza at the intersection of the Netzarim corridor, working alongside an Egyptian security firm. So there you go. We have sort of Blackwater mercenaries, it looks like. But again, it's absolutely American boots on the ground. So according to the company spokesperson, recruits can shoot at Palestinians they deem to be a security threat, emphasizing that the mercenaries have the right to defend ourselves. Yeah. that's very unfortunate, but yeah, the sabotage is in place. And again, knowing that Hamas saying that the hostage releases were delayed due to Israeli ceasefire violations, this was by design, right? It's in response. You have the Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz placed the Israeli military on high alert, of course, and that was when this report, I believe it was yesterday. It might have been the 9th. The report about Netanyahu intending to sabotage the deal. But it is, it is very unfortunate that it seems as if this was doomed to fail from the beginning. So, yeah, according to Haaretz, Israeli sources have told them that they believe Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu intends to sabotage the Gaza hostage and ceasefire deal, and that Israeli negotiators headed to Qatar will not advance the agreement to its second phase. It's a show, one source told Haaretz. Netanyahu is signaling quite clearly that he doesn't want to move to the next phase. He's sending a team without a mandate and without the ability to do anything. The report comes as Netanyahu is returning to Israel after his week-long trip to the U.S., where he received a strong show of support from President Donald Trump and congressional lawmakers. During the visit, Trump advanced new arms deals for Israel, sanctioned the International Criminal Court (ICC) on behalf of Netanyahu, and floated his plan for a U.S. takeover of the Gaza Strip, which has emboldened Netanyahu and his allies to advance their goal of ethnic cleansing. Yes, it definitely has done that. And of course, that reminds me of when Elon did the spaces with Trump before the election. I remember one of the key statements that he made that really kind of raised red flags for me, and not really, and because I was very much already under the impression that was kind of their approach and opinion on Israel, but still to hear him condemn Kamala in the strongest terms for how she stood up Netanyahu when he came to address Congress, and that, I believe, they said it was shameful, I believe is what Trump said. And so it was just like the fact that they were both bringing it up in such strong terms in regard to the way that they could condemn Kamala Harris was the best way that they could condemn her was to claim that, look at her disrespecting Netanyahu, right? And so that alone, I've been very concerned from day one when it comes to Trump's Gaza policy, right? So we already know that he was probably the best thing that ever happened to Israel. So another source speaking to Haaretz said Netanyahu's conduct could jeopardize the current phase of the ceasefire. The process is working, hostages are being released, but Hamas is doing this with the expectation of a second stage leading to a full ceasefire and Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. Once Hamas realizes there won't be a second stage, they may not complete the first. And that's exactly what's taking place right now. So Israeli forces have continued to kill Palestinians inside Gaza throughout the ceasefire, but so far, Hamas hasn't responded. It's possible Israel could ramp up the violence in Gaza in an effort to provoke Hamas as a way to restart its genocidal war with U.S. support. which definitely was my concern, was the calm before the storm, lure in many of the Palestinians back into the area in order to kind of um, once and for all really go forward with the ethnic cleansing, and that makes all the sense in the world considering the Moabs that were just sent and authorized by the new presidential administration. So Israeli forces, yes, the genocidal war with U.S. support. One of Haaretz's sources said the images of Hamas fighters in Gaza during hostage releases have hurt Netanyahu's support among the Israeli right wing, which includes Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who has threatened to quit the government if military operations don't resume after the first phase. Right-wing voters see that we haven't defeated Hamas, and its operatives are still roaming with weapons. The signs on stages in Gaza during the hostage return events mock Netanyahu and reference his total victory slogan, the source said. Netanyahu knows he doesn't have a government if he proceeds with the deal. Netanyahu had sabotaged previous rounds of negotiations before the current ceasefire deal was reached in January. Former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, who is also wanted by the ICC for his role in war crimes in Gaza, said in an interview last week that a proposal Hamas had agreed to in July 2024 was identical to the current one. My God. Yeah, Israel's just Middle Eastern Puerto Rico trying to be the next Ukrainian forever war. Well said, my friend. Well said. Yeah, that is very concerning, I think. And this I believe today Jonathan Cook, he authored an article as well that talks about the Gaza war was a lie, as is the ceasefire Trump just told you. And I really think that maybe let's see, maybe one more video of Trump. Well, I guess it's not necessary. He's just talking about conceivably withholding aid to Jordan and Egypt if they don't take in Palestinians for this sort of resettlement process. But it's not really worth showing at the very least. And then, of course, he's calling Hamas. Trump says Hamas are sick people and all hell is going to break loose if the hostages in Gaza are not freed by Saturday at noon. Let's see, there was one other thing I wanted to cover in regard to this, and I believe it had to do with, let me find it. Yeah, it was the actual Hamas response to this delayed ceasefire, right? And that is, it's very interesting because again, you're getting an actual response from Hamas who are essentially calling an end to the ceasefire itself because Trump himself says Gaza ceasefire should be canceled if all hostages not released by noon on Saturday, as I said. So earlier in the day, yesterday, Hamas announced the next hostage release was postponed due to Israeli ceasefire violations. So that is the consequence. And if all the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, this is Trump's quote, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it, and all bets are off. Let hell break out, Trump said. He stressed that all remaining Israeli hostages should be released by Saturday, which is not part of the deal. Trump said that the decision was up to Israel, but his comments suggest he's ready to back Israel if it restarts its genocidal war on Gaza. Trump's comments come after the spokesman for Hamas's armed wing announced that the next Israeli hostage release has been postponed until further notice, citing Israeli ceasefire violations. Since the ceasefire went into effect on January 19th, Israeli forces have killed dozens of Palestinians in Gaza, including 3 who were killed on Sunday while trying to return to their homes near Gaza City. Gaza officials have said Israel has also not let in sufficient aid deliveries into Gaza, including materials needed to provide temporary housing for Palestinians. The leadership of the resistance has monitored the enemy's violations and failure to abide by the terms of the agreement during the past 3 weeks, from delaying the return of the displaced to the northern Gaza Strip, targeting them with shelling and gunfire in various areas of the Strip, and not allowing relief supplies of all kinds to enter as agreed upon, while the resistance has implemented all its obligations. Abu Obaida, spokesman for Hamas's Qassam brigade, said in a statement. Obaida said the next hostage release scheduled for February 15th is delayed until the occupation commits to and compensates for the entitlements of the past weeks retroactively, and we affirm our commitment to the terms of the agreement as long as the occupation commits to them. Later in the day, Hamas released another statement saying that it announced its intention to delay the hostage exchange to give mediators time to get Israel to live up to its end of the ceasefire. Hamas's intention in releasing this statement 5 days before the date scheduled for the release of the captives is to allow the mediators enough time to pressure the occupation to fulfill its commitments and to keep the door open for the exchange to take place on time, as long as the occupation meets its obligations, Hamas said. In response to Hamas's announcement, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said it was a complete violation of the ceasefire agreement and hostage deal and ordered the Israeli military to be on the highest level of alert for any possible scenario in Gaza and to protect the Gaza border communities. Man, it does not look good. It does not look good. So I guess now we can make the final pivot and discuss. Oh yeah, here we go. This was Peter Thiel's Compact magazine, which of course is advocating for the ethnic cleansing and occupation of Gaza as well. And it says, looking upon the devastation, Trump's vision is breathtaking but sobering in its simplicity. Left to their own devices, the Israelis and Palestinians could bring themselves to ruin. So that's the framework of Compact magazine, Peter Thiel's propaganda outlet. So, all right, I think that pretty much does it for those main. Well, I did have one final thread, but it has nothing to do with Israel. It's actually about the TV series Generation Kill, and we're really more about Evan Wright. It's just that his book, of course, led to, the mini series, which I think was only one season. And I even think David Simon was the creator who did The Wire, which I love The Wire. But I appreciate you, JMS, for sure, brother. But it's very interesting because this guy, Evan Wright, he was embedded with the Marines during the U.S. invasion of Iraq, and he wrote this, huge article that turned best-selling novel about his time there, which became an acclaimed miniseries by David Simon, as I said, and was abused apparently in a U.S. government-funded research program as a teenager, and then recently died by suicide not too long ago. So, very interesting, and this strange account on Twitter has a pretty decent thread on it. Actually, I'll show you guys, and it kind of jogged my it at the very least it caught my eye and forced me to kind of pull up a few other articles that I wasn't prepared to kind of jump down that rabbit hole, but it's worthwhile. And so I clicked into this. It says, so weird that this award-winning author, who was basically a Pentagon and CIA asset for his whole career, killed himself just days after announcing that his next book was about how he was abused as a child in a secretive federally funded psychiatric research program. So I pulled this up, and of course, well, first of all, I think that it was, yeah, here we go. So it turns out that he also wrote the first articles about Rick Prado, who apparently while he was embedded with the U.S. Marine Corps, he wrote, of course, The Killer Elite, right? This article, but he also wrote an expose about a top CIA officer who allegedly worked as a mafia hitman, how to get away with murder in America. And I looked that up, and apparently also Rick Prado, a real person, a former top CIA officer, deeply involved in the global war on terror, who was the target of a 7-year FBI investigation for his alleged role in a string of murders, as is detailed in the book. This is a tweet by Evan Wright, the author, which actually began as a Vanity Fair article that got too long. Okay, so there apparently Manny Prado was being apparently it's a cop gone wrong or rogue serial killer, and was told that the character Evan Wright is likewise also based on an actual in real life journalist and writer. And so he was asking Evan Wright about this, right? And it's a very interesting thing that seems to play out here. But let's see. I went back to this thread because the Seed was accused of torturing children and actually received federal funding until 1974, and continued to operate until I believe 2001 is when it was closed down. And I looked this up because this is interesting. That is a strange symbol to have as kind of the crest for your organization. But Evan Wright appeared in this Max documentary, Teen Torture, Inc., in which he spoke about his time in the Seed, a controversial scared straight program for children in Florida. And let's see, Evan Wright, Generation Kill author. I pulled up this this independent article about Evan Wright, and it goes into a little bit more detail about how the award-winning journalist and author behind Generation Kill died at age 59. His wife confirmed the news to Rolling Stone. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed the writer's cause of death as suicide. So the book, based on his time as an embedded reporter in the U.S. Marines during the invasion of Iraq in 2003, was adapted into the successful HBO series, highlighting the disordered nature of U.S. military action during what was termed the War on Terror, in which hundreds of thousands of civilians were killed. Okay, here's where it gets interesting. Born in Ohio in 1964 to parents who were lawyers, Wright was sent to the Seed Clinic, a home for juvenile delinquents, when he was 13. The stay came after his mother suffered a breakdown when her best friend and her husband were murdered by her son. He documented his time at the Seed in HBO Max documentary Teen Torture, Inc., released earlier in 2024, I believe. The disciplinary techniques used by the institution drew comparisons to those used in North Korea during the Korean War. It was shut down in 2001 after a Senate report revealed it used sleep deprivation, threats of physical violence, public humiliation, and constant surveillance as a means of controlling children. Wright supported the testimony of Paris Hilton at the U.S. House of Representatives Committee when she discussed her experience at similar youth facilities during her childhood. And keep in mind, that was this the same guy with the Rolling Stone article under Obama? No, that was Michael Hastings, right? I believe, who did the Runaway General about Stanley McChrystal, and then inevitably was, I believe, murdered, especially considering that the Vault 7 documents dropped just after his death that proved that the CIA and the intelligence community were capable of hacking into the computer motherboard on your vehicle. And essentially, they could take over complete control of your vehicle. And he had a new Mercedes, I think, and effectively they could slam your accelerator to the floor, lock your car doors, and there was nothing you could do about it. And that's what I think happened to Michael Hastings, because there's proof and evidence that shows that it's very natural, if only physically reactionary in nature, to at the very last second remove your foot off the accelerator, no matter if you are trying to commit suicide due to the impact. and that did not take place when in Michael Hastings' vehicle. That accelerator remained at the floor, and that alone raises a lot of suspicions, especially considering all the weird, strange factors involved with, his alleged breakdown after. Yeah, he was suggesting that he had a huge bombshell story that he was about to drop, exposing this elite level of corruption, and then he winds up dead on Sunset Boulevard at like 2 a.m. So anyway, it's very, very disturbing to consider that, but I do 100% believe that Michael Hastings was murdered, and uh, let's see. I remember that. Ray says, I remember that Michael Hastings' death, likely that happened in the plane crash. You'll have to let me know what you mean about that, because I'm trying to jog my memory, but I have no recollection of. Oh, you're talking about the recent plane crash? I'm not quite sure. If you are, let me know, because that is an interesting concept. Yeah. So this is Wright, Evan Wright, and found dead at 59, allegedly due to suicide. Who, it's funny that, or it's not funny, but it's interesting that he's talking about Paris Hilton's recent, more recent attempt to kind of hold some of these child care institutions and organizations accountable for their, child abuse and commonplace practice of child abuse. And it's really an institutionalized level too that it's been discovered. And so Evan Wright was considering her to be essentially a sister in trauma. And, that's probably entirely accurate, especially considering how Jose and I just showed pictures of her on the arm of Adnan Khashoggi, and, clearly in the orbit of Ghislaine Maxwell, who I believe she was attempting to arrange her in some sort of strange relationship for certain, prominent individuals within their network of blackmail. So I'm not at all surprised that Paris Hilton was potentially abused as a child. I mean, that makes all the sense in the world. So Wright, he wrote for Vanity Fair and Rolling Stone, Time on the topic of subcultures, and was the chief pornographic reviewer for Hustler magazine during the early part of his career. Shortly before his death, he posted a chapter outline of a book based on his time at Seed. Here's a fun fact for anyone who sees Teen Torture Inc. this week on Max, he wrote in the post dated July 10th. The main story I tell is excerpted from a book that I started writing on January 17th, 1982. I wrote my outline in my sketchbook because up until this night, I'd planned to be a cartoonist or photographer. I decided to become a professional writer on this night to tell my story, and I've been working on this book ever since. It's been a monster job. And he died just a few days later after posting about how he was going to expose the child abuse, the institutionalized child abuse in the SEED program. And anyway, it's definitely what he did expose with the Enrique Ricky Prado is it really kind of caught my eye, right? And I instantly went and I looked up a piece on this Enrique Ricky Prado. Hit the like button for sure. And yeah, remote hacking. Absolutely. And it's very possible. I think it happens far more often than we're aware of. But yeah, here's one other thing I can show you guys about this Enrique Ricky Prado, because he's a high-level CIA spook accused of murders in Miami. And again, this falls in with, sort of the Hand of Death cult and Henry Lee Lucas and all these strangely well-established serial killers that tend to have direct ties to the intelligence community to some degree. So this article starts very interestingly as well. It says criminals tend to talk a lot of shit. So journalist Evan Wright wasn't exactly convinced when a former cocaine mega smuggler told him he once performed a contract murder with a drug world enforcer who went on to become a CIA spy. But when Wright researched the claim, he was stunned. It should be on Rumble, Robin. I think it should be on my Rumble, which is the Underclass Podcast Rumble. If it's not, definitely let me know. It should be though. I haven't gotten any sort of alert that it's not functioning. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't post to Jose's Rumble whenever I do these because it's a different process, and you have to kind of be personally be able to log into the individual Rumble and then end the stream on your own. So it's a little bit of a different process. But whenever I do them by myself, I'll for sure try and let you guys know that go check it out on my personal Rumble, the Underclass Podcast, and give it a subscribe to, because I'm trying to grow that a little bit more. I don't have any of my archived available episodes yet from the past, but definitely all the live streams I've been doing lately have been going directly there, and you can still find those. So at some point, I will have to get the rest of that archive up there on the Rumble. But let's see. JMS says Miami cartel Colts and Everglades satanic missile silos. Yeah, man. I mean, this is really like par for the course in terms of, if you remember, all those different clandestine black sites that were discovered after JFK took office, and he was unaware that Nixon had basically, kind of tapped in Howard Hughes to provide a private sector plausible deniability for, essentially training up Cuban exiles on these domestic black sites, in sort of all of these different techniques of paramilitary groups that stage a lot of these gladio, destabilization operations and tactics all around the world domestically in various countries. It just, whichever country is the target at the time, you can sort of greenlight these paramilitary organizations and groups that have been radicalized on these operational black sites. And my God, man, yeah, I appreciate you. Definitely, I understand avoiding YouTube, but but yeah. So again, this just like spurred all of that in my mind's eye, and it should, because this is commonplace, man. This is a recycled tactic as always, and Robin, I like your style. So anyway, it gets into some strange territory in regard to this individual, Enrique. And so when Wright researched the claim, he was stunned. Hard evidence showed a high-level spook specializing in counterterrorism was suspected by the Miami-Dade Police Department in not one, but 7 murders. And this is, again, par for the course. You have serial killers being trained on domestic black sites in the U.S. That's what Henry Lee Lucas claimed in the Hand of Death cult. And not only were they being trained in these paramilitary operations, they were being trained in abductions, how to abduct children. And so you're talking, an enterprise combining the various techniques of that really play into all the different aspects of organized crime, and and so it never. We've had this discussion, just over and over. It's how many times have we had this similar conversation, and yet people are unaware of the fact that these techniques of destabilization are trained domestically at these covert, it's absolutely amazing, especially considering how on Tinfoil Hat just recently I was talking about the New Mexico training compound training up children to become mass shooters and school shooters, and then you combine that with Abu Taba and the former FBI CIA counterterrorism expert who who had set up the Radical Islamic Seminary course online, right? And was not only targeting Omar Mateen, but targeting Michael Sanford, this autistic kid from the UK who's like 19 years old, and effectively a month after the Pulse nightclub shooting, grabs the service revolver of a Washington Las Vegas Metropolitan Police officer, I believe, and at the Treasure Island Resort Casino, because that's where they were having a Donald Trump campaign rally event. And he grabs the service revolver, or attempts to, is wrestled to the ground, and then he tells the authorities that he did this with the goal of assassinating Donald Trump. And that was in 2016, a month after the Pulse nightclub shooting. And you know who James Wesley Howell said that he saw at the CIA black site, which, by the way, he claimed he was lured there through the Islamic seminary course, but with the best of intentions, meaning in no way was he aware that the CIA or different federal organizations had been involved until he apparently showed up at this CIA black site alongside Michael Sanford, who was the individual in Vegas, and apparently Omar Mateen, which he claims he was with as well, and that they were all trained together. And he even gave details of Michael Sanford's BMW and his vehicle. And you know who James Wesley Howell says he saw at this domestic black site in the U.S. in 2016? He claims that he saw Uma Abedin and Hillary Clinton. So that's very strange. But you could see how there could potentially be some sort of layered operation in hopes of procuring your seat in power in DC. You never know, right? It's definitely a possibility. But who knows how many interests were overlapping and colliding in those moments. But it's still worth mentioning, especially considering that apparently this is very commonplace. And we are unaware of the fact that, and I believe Henry Lee Lucas claimed that they were tipped off at their clandestine black site in Louisiana, I think, Mississippi maybe, but I think it was Louisiana, and that basically they were tipped off whenever there would be military flyovers. And so whenever the helicopters or various planes would fly over the area, they would receive a tip in advance, and they would be able to kind of remain hidden from the aerial view, right? And so very, very, very interesting. So Wright was, of course, the author of the Iraq War tome Generation Kill, and the investigation traces the journey of Enrique Ricky Prado from alleged mafia hitman. It apparently makes the allegations in How to Get Away with Murder in America, which is a 124-page ebook released by internet publisher Byliner. And the investigation traces this journey of Enrique Ricky Prado from alleged mafia hitman and drug dealer to his perch near the top of the CIA, and then Blackwater, the private contractor that has handled much of the United States' dirty work in Iraq. Holy shit. So Blackwater is instantly tapped into this narrative, which Eric Prince, man, Betsy DeVos, I believe she had some role in education in Trump's prior administration, his first administration. And so Prado, he first appeared on Wright's radar when he was co-authoring former Medellin cartel smuggler John Roberts' memoir, American Desperado. The since-deceased Roberts bragged that he and Prado had gunned down Richard Schwartz, famed gangster Meyer Lansky's stepson, in a North Bay Village hit in 1977. Wright unearthed thousands of pages and documents. He writes that implicated Prado in so many murders that one investigator said he was technically a serial killer. Like, we have another spook considered to be a serial killer. So there we go. And seems like just a similar story that I feel like I've read before. But anyway, so Prado was the enforcer for eccentric convicted drug trafficker Alberto San Pedro, according to Wright. Though Miami-Dade police and federal agents built cases against Prado in the murders of Schwartz and others, no charges were filed. He joined the CIA in the mid-90s and skyrocketed through its ranks, supervising the hunt for Osama bin Laden and directing SEAL Team 6 missions into Afghanistan. And yeah, again, I think of Pat Tillman And I think of Stanley McChrystal's role in JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command, which is really the umbrella, the the umbrella term and organization for all the different special forces groups within the military, and their black operations budget essentially goes through JSOC, right? And then ASOC is the other one that's not really dealing in black operations, right? So Wright thought the notion of a character, which by the way, Pat Tillman, what I was alluding to was the fact that Stanley McChrystal was running JSOC at the time that Pat Tillman's friendly fire incident took place. And so Pat Tillman had essentially become a dissenting voice, which was very prominent at the time, clearly knowing his background in the NFL. So he had a lot of public influence. And so merely the fact that he was attempting to kind of publicly dissent against the foreign policy approach of the U.S. invasion in Iraq, and how it was not at all the propaganda that he had been sold, and that there were clearly special interests involved with our military being as far as just occupying Iraq at the time, and so he had become more of a dissenting voice, and then he just so happens to be murdered in a friendly fire accident, which was really covered up by Stanley McChrystal at the time. And Stanley McChrystal attempted to keep it from public, perception and from the public spotlight. But inevitably it did come forward that it was friendly fire. And in my mind, he was executed. It's kind of par for the course in regard to some of these special forces groups, especially. I didn't realize I'm doing this Fort Bragg episode. I pulled up another article that's entirely, it doesn't have anything to do with the Jeffrey McDonald case from 1970, but it has it has all of these recent examples of murders and suicides that have happened on the Fort Bragg base. And obviously, this is where that's the home of U.S. Special Forces, and also the JFK Special Warfare Center. And if anyone is unaware, there are direct connections to all of the different manufactured crises and false flag events that have occurred, including the 1993, Omar Abdul Rahman, World Trade Center attack, right? The false flag. There are so many different connections that connect back to Fort Bragg, and it's really extraordinary when you look at. Apparently, there's these special forces members where not only have there been a number of suicides in the recent past at Fort Bragg, and all of them seemingly special forces officers. There have also been a lot of different special forces officers who have murdered their wives on the base. And this is something that I was unaware of as well until I was recently reading this article. And then it turns out that apparently, there's still a lot of drug trafficking and distribution happening at these military bases, which is, again, not at all surprising. But the fact of the matter is that if you're a part of it, and it, then there's always this risk being ran that either people who aren't involved become aware, and so they then of course are targeted, or people who are very much involved, they either become compromised, or who knows what the case may be. But we should definitely read that article at some point as well, because it 100% breaks down just the extraordinary level of corruption happening at Fort Bragg and a lot of these different U.S. military bases. So it very much seems as if they are kind of the root cause of like a lot of this international drug trafficking coming through the military bases covertly and then being distributed throughout the domestic United States after the fact. And it's really become clear to me that you have a lot of these authorities involved, but not only the military police, as I was saying earlier, but also you have local police that are entirely compromised. And knowing the past of how essentially these police departments and police chiefs kind of facilitate these prostitution networks as well, and these kind of um, networks of human trafficking, it becomes very much more of a concern, and so I'll end with a little bit more of the story that I had intended to tell the other day. When what was it? Friday? Yeah, the last time I did a live stream with you guys, we were talking about Operation Together, right? And yeah, Fort Hood as well. Yeah, I saw a lot of different reports on Fort Hood being involved as a very corrupt military base, where you can point to as far as a lot of different examples of the corrupt nature of these clandestine operations being conducted domestically, just right under our noses, and it's a policy that has been um, really just a tool of kind of exploiting our international foreign policy as far as the empire is concerned. So, but anyway, we'll finish with this part, the key roles in Operation Together, because the entire point being that I was really using it as an example of the cover up, right? Which so consistently seems to take place in regard to a lot of these networks of abuse. And so, we had discussed how the New York State and city officials really created this New York State Select Committee on Crime in 1982 as a result and consequence of Operation Together being entirely covered up. And so there were three confidential informants, and one was given a code name Nevada. I had mentioned on Saturday. They had gave information about a meeting held in East Side bar between individuals connected with homosexual bars and members of organized crime, allegedly planning the murder of Mr. Bloom, who was involved in this Operation Together. And the police strategy was to target persons involved in homosexual bar activities, and by arresting them for narcotics or other violations, force them to supply information about the murders or about organized crime. I figured if I could get a handle on the Bloom murder, Mr. Flaxman said, we then could sort out what organized crime was doing in Manhattan. That was the DA. This same names kept on popping up no matter what we investigated: homicides, narcotics, bars. This strategy, according to Captain James Slattery, who was in charge of the daily progress of the investigation, was remarkably ineffective. While a dozen arrests ultimately were made, Captain Slattery said none of those arrested would talk in exchange for a better deal. So it was contended that, however, the investigation was stymied by the brass. And this is where we ended up on Saturday. The investigators were just not allowed to continue working on the case when they should have been. At times, I thought this investigation was stopped at a crucial stage, at a stage when we were close to a solution. Do I think the investigation was blocked? That certainly is a fair interpretation of what went down. A detective who will be working with the state committee said, we were getting to a point where we would have been able to find out why all these organized crime bars in Manhattan are allowed to operate. We were ready to do a real cleanup of Manhattan, but no one wanted that. That's why they stopped us. The detective asked for anonymity. The after effects of Operation Together are still being felt by some of the officers who participated. It appears that the men involved were punished for their participation. One officer, previously recommended for promotion to detective, who was transferred from a plainclothes investigative unit to a uniformed precinct patrol. Another detective, who was considered an expert on Midtown Vice, was moved to precinct work in Harlem. The new state-city investigation might take as long as 1 year, and of course, it took longer. He said the primary goals were to uncover how the mob, through coercion and violence, has taken over bars, massage parlors, and porno shops, and to provide the city with stronger laws to close businesses involved in pornography. So there was clearly a cover-up that took place during this time, as far as the New York State Select Committee on Crime was concerned. And it was very much not only involving organized crime, but also involving, elite prominent members of the local government and the federal government. And so, again, this just falls within the context of really, there was so much corruption at the time, right? And basically, government's cooperation with the organized crime syndicates and the mafia during World War II led to its expansion after the war and set the stage for its future collaboration with United States intelligence agencies. So that's why you have this cross-pollination happening so often. And top government officials were also aware that the government's Faustian pact with the mafia during World War II had allowed the hoods to insinuate themselves into mainstream America. In return for services rendered during the war, mafia bosses were protected from prosecution for dozens of unsolved murders. The mafia was a huge problem in 1951, but it was also a protected branch of the CIA, which was co-opting criminal organizations around the world and using them in its secret war against communism. So again, just like Roy Cohn, right? It's all within the context of justifying these sadistic, corrupt policies and operations, is that it was to combat the communist threat. And the mafia had collaborated with the government and had emerged from World War II, energized and empowered. They controlled cities across the country. And that never changed. I believe that organized crime was truly just consolidated into the government. And so in April of 2005, there was information received from a source who stated he had been a field analyst for the CIA. The source stated that as a result of the Johnny Gosch kidnapping on September 5th, 1982, he and 19 others were assigned to do an investigation to make sure that the CIA or a rogue element of the CIA was not involved in using children. The fear was that foreign intelligence operations would classify them as a bunch of pedophiles. The source stated he was selected because of special qualifications he had, which would allow him to penetrate the sinister subculture. Johnny Gosch was the first of 3 similar kidnappings that the source stated were conducted by the same group of kidnappers. All 3 victims were newspaper delivery boys. The second kidnapping was Eugene Martin. Gosch and Martin were from Des Moines, Iowa. The third intended victim was a local newspaper delivery boy from St. Joseph, Minnesota. When interviewed, he stated he was able to escape by slipping out of his coat and running. When this kidnapping failed, a second attempt was made, and Jacob Wetterling was kidnapped. To this date, none of these crimes have been solved. The source stated that their investigation continued until 1989. The evidence uncovered during this investigation proved that 834 children were kidnapped and used by this pedophile subculture. This is only the tip of the iceberg of the depravity that was uncovered. The evidence was passed up to higher authorities in the agency, where, as always, the hierarchy covered it up. Now, I think it's very interesting that knowing Detective James Rothstein and how many of these networks are often covered up, right? By, of course, you have a good example of that being the Tippy Richardson connection that James Rothstein has exposed, right? And I've mentioned that before in passing, but there's also this strange article called Project Ambition that I mentioned before, and it involves legendary NYPD detective James Rothstein and the Son of Sam as far as discussing human trafficking and pedophilia in Minnesota and North Dakota. And it was always the CIA, he said. Son of Sam, smiley face killers, Jacob Wetterling, Johnny Gosch, and the New York State Select Committee on Crime. So Timothy Charles Holmesith, he's also this award-winning news reporter and investigative journalist, and he was an FBI witness in a national profile kidnapping case. He captured rogue CIA and FBI child traffickers on tape discussing details of their covert operations. He has been targeted for a decade. In 2019, Timothy Charles Holmesith became part of the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force. Now, this is where it starts to get very interesting because Timothy Charles Holmesith, he has a conversation on February 5th, 2019, and he has a conversation with Detective James Rothstein. And this was published in 2019, but in 2009 is when he actually had this conversation. And that's when he was really exposed to the international CIA child sex trafficking and child trafficking and child pornography operations staging out of Broward County, Florida. And from that day on, he claims, I have been repeatedly arrested by the police in East Grand Forks, Minnesota, who are working with a group from Indiana connected to the U.S. Air Force to stop me from publishing information online. This is according to Timothy Charles Holmesith. I was soon advised I wasn't big enough to expose this and live. So I found the guy that did, and he was living just down the road, the mayor of St. Martin, Minnesota. But would he even talk to me? I decided to give it a shot. My time was running out. Hi, Jim. My name is Timothy Holmesith, I said with a pregnant pause. I've heard about you, he instantly replied. Oh my God, Holmesith says. Jimmy Boots Rothstein had heard about me. What can I do to help you, he asked. I told him I had a problem. In 1968, NYPD Detective Jim Rothstein, known as Jimmy Boots, was tasked with uncovering the CIA's massive trafficking and pedophile networks, which he would report to the New York State Select Committee on Crime. I was given unlimited money, and my job was to find out what was going on. And it was spent infiltrating the shadow government, using pedophilia, prostitution, human trafficking, and that, Rothstein said. I told him that's what got me on the radar of the local police. I don't have that problem, Rothstein said, commenting on my situation. They stay away from me like I've got the plague. I'd long since heard about the legendary mayor of St. Martin, but I was about to have my eyes opened big time. I caught the CIA where they were using 3 little boys to compromise somebody, Rothstein said. He said they murdered 3, 2 14-year-olds and a 15-year-old. And the 4th one survived. And they were boys, apparently. Rothstein said the murders were committed by 2 CIA operatives named Barry DeSanko and Aquarius Hador. The names would become key figures in Rothstein's work and shed a great deal of light on my Minnesota problem. Remember, that thing in Florida where the CIA killed some kids and stopped an investigation? I was in Washington when they called in, Rothstein said. He was referring to the notorious case of the Finders. I was in Washington when the customs guys called in, and what you read about the Finders now, or what you read about the Finders now, and what it was originally is bullshit, he said. Jimmy Boots had my attention. It was a Finders member I had captured on tape discussing child pornography of a missing child, selling infants through the U.S. Embassy, and stealing babies from mothers using Florida DCF and police. I knew I had struck gold, just like I had been assured I would by an insider who told me Jimmy Boots has the answers. There were times I had 200 detectives working with me, Rothstein said. I had all that shit in North Dakota and Minnesota, with the shit that came off of the Son of Sam case, and then the smiley face killers and that stuff. Listening to Jimmy Boots is like a scrolling flashback, flipping through decades of old headlines. They love to do this, to harass you, to stop you from doing what you're doing, Rothstein said, casually referring to the CIA in his thick Minnesota accent. I had all that stuff that was going on up there. Probably that's why they're after you. To stop you from starting any crap up there because Minnesota is really bad. I told Rothstein that I'd recently submitted evidence to United States Attorney General Matthew Whitaker and FBI Director Christopher Wray that included a never-before-heard audio confession of a man who was present at the ritual murder sacrifice of Jacob Wetterling. Jimmy Boots was way ahead of me. You talked to Diane Muehlbauer, didn't you? He said. He was correct. I'd recently published a series on the Jacob Wetterling case that contained taped confessions from a kidnapper present at the abduction, as well as a man who said he assisted the child's father, Jerry Wetterling, with the ritual murder. The witness to the murder said Jacob's last words were, "Daddy, Daddy, don't." The confessions and covert recordings were captured by Diane Muehlbauer, a bail bondsman from St. Cloud, Minnesota, who worked with a PI named Larry Pert and Associates, to gather the evidence. The Stearns County Sheriff's Office actively hid the evidence for decades. I also learned from an Ohio researcher, Julie Tremp, who made the news after she exposed a dangerous pedophile named Harold Jerry Mash, that a search warrant from the Jacob Wetterling case revealed the bones that were found by law enforcement and purported to be Jacob Wetterling were later determined by the lab to not be human. Then, Rothstein said something that I believe will shake the foundation of the Republic. When I came out here and ran into Diane Muehlbauer, the information she had verified all the things that I had, he said. Oh my God. Rothstein had just verified the U.S. government had always known the truth about Jacob Wetterling's murder, and it matched the Muehlbauer evidence. The retired NYPD detective knew the Muehlbauer evidence told the real story. It was all coming together, and other things were making sense too. Ronald Gallstad, the city attorney for East Grand Forks, Minnesota, had requested the Polk County Court order order me to be psychologically evaluated after I wrote about the Wetterling evidence and told the Grand Forks Herald during an interview that local officials were involved in a sex trafficking cover-up. David Murphy, city administrator, East Grand Forks, told the Herald, I was sick for saying such a thing about hardworking government employees. He was wrong. Wow. It's crazy. During my evaluation, Charles Kamilewski, PhD, LP, told me the police had given him CDs with interviews I had done with the U of M professor, Sarah Westall, who had interviewed me on her web program regarding the Wetterling case. He subsequently submitted his evaluation results to the court, wherein he mentioned my reporting on the cover-up regarding Jacob's bones. He found I was entirely competent. NYPD detective Jim Rothstein, retired, sat down with Sarah Westall to discuss his work for the New York State Select Committee on Crime. I had dodged a CIA bullet intended to classify me as crazy, and an existing plan involving Gallstad and some operatives connected to the U.S. Air Force who wanted to have me committed into a mental institution. And now, talking to Jimmy Boots Rothstein, I was getting the Paul Harvey version of why my life had been turned upside down. Did you know there was a CIA guy who had 19 people working him who worked the Jacob Wetterling case? Rothstein said. Excuse me. Understanding CIA is not an investigative agency. I asked Rothstein why there was CIA present during the Wetterling case. Because the Wetterling case is connected to the Johnny Gosch case, the Martin Allen, the Pats case in New York, and the killing of the 3 little boys on East 64th Street in New York. They are all connected, Rothstein said. Did you know there was a CIA guy at St. John's University in Collegeville, Minnesota? Did you know that? By the name of William Van Cleve, he said. Rothstein rolled out facts and circumstances like he was simply reciting the ABCs. He was there for many years. Oh yeah, that's why they were here. I knew the CIA guy. I talked to him. Diane Muehlbauer has even got a tape of it. The whole Jacob Wetterling case is protecting St. John's. I knew the whole story behind St. John's. I had the place infiltrated many years ago already, and the CIA was there because they had used it to launder money. They used the extortion to compromise people and then launder money through the Bahamas, through the Vatican Bank, he explained. And that's why anybody that would have investigated the Jacob Wetterling case, it would have exposed St. John's. Don't believe this shit that Danny Heinrich did it, he scoffed. CIA operatives Barry DeSanko and Aquarius Hador. Check up there in your town. They were up there in the East Grand Forks, Detroit Lakes, and all through there, Rothstein said. They were running the stuff that came out of the Son of Sam case, you know, the whole pedophile thing. What's up, Fire Pixie? You've got to remember the Son of Sam case is a cover-up, he said. Berkowitz only killed 2 people. 6 of them were killed by Barry DeSanko and Aquarius Hador. What the fuck? I asked if the murders were ritualistic like Jacob Wetterling. They were just outright sex murders. It was just like killing the 3 boys on East 64th Street. They were having sex with them, and during the sex, they killed them, he said, very matter of fact. It takes the CIA right into it and what they were doing, which came as the result of the Process Church, which was the one that started, or we started closing in on them in 76. They started moving west along on Interstate 90, Interstate 94. And we used to call them the Interstate 90-94 killings, Rothstein said. I have all the names and all the people. North Dakota and Minnesota, up in that area, you've also got to remember the Underground Railroad ran through the Red Lake Indian Reservation where these kids could escape if they survived. There's all kinds of shit up there, he said, walking me up and down highways, cities, and small towns. He said traffickers use Highway 2, which runs through the East Grand Forks, to traffic narcotics and whatever else that comes in on ships to Duluth. I infiltrated the Underground Railroad. I knew the guys who were running it. It was a priest and a big Indian guy. They were helping these kids. Rothstein said Native American children were being used and abused. The use of the Native American kids. We even brought a Native American girl to New York to testify. She was a thalidomide baby and had a flipper for a left arm, and we exposed the whole thing with the human trafficking and it's all covered up in these towns like St. Cloud. I asked Rothstein a question. Who do you think somebody like Ronald Gallstad, he's the city attorney in East Grand Forks, who do you think he's answering to? Rothstein didn't even pause. The power brokers in Minnesota that have been covering this up since the day Lieutenant Gary McGahee and Kenny Tidgwell from the Minneapolis Police Department took it on, and the 2 of them both lost their whole life over it. This is how the cover-up happens. Rothstein sounded audibly upset and disturbed when he talked about the 2 Minneapolis police officers who had their lives destroyed for doing their job. It's the same shit that's been covering this up in Minnesota since 1966, when I saw and got the first information of the Minnesota connection to the organized prostitution and pedophilia run out of Minnesota, and it's been covered up ever since. Even the New York Times and the Minneapolis papers wrote how the police authorities shut it down and destroyed McGahee and Tidgwell. There's official documentation. We had hearings on that with the State Select Committee on Crime. We had all the information. It just never stopped. That's why they don't want you bringing any of this shit up there. You got to be kidding me, he said with a sarcastic laugh. You know, if I walk into the state capitol here, they run for cover. When I go to a meeting there where there's anything like this comes up and I walk in there, it's like a pin. You could hear a pin drop because I have names, dates, places. I personally saw the sheriff of Stearns County at a topless bar in Minneapolis in the late 1960s and 70s with the hookers. McGahee identified Sheriff Ellering and Sheriff Peltzer from Morrison County, the sheriff from Cass Lake, which is Highway 2. and the sheriff from Crow Wing County with the hookers supplying girls to the pimps. We got all that. We had all that. The girls' home in South Center was supplying hookers. It hasn't changed. Rothstein explained that even FBI agents were targeted for destruction if they tried to expose the organized crime. The whole story behind St. John's. There was an FBI agent that came here for about 3 years. He'd come once a month. One day he asked me about Tom Patterson at St. John's, and I told him what it was. And when he went, after that, 30 days later, he came and said, "You're right." He says, "I'm out of here." And I've never seen or heard from him again because I told him what would happen to him if he went after it. Rothstein said, "I could give the names of FBI agents and cops who worked this stuff and their careers were over. So if you come along and stir the shit up, what do you think they're going to do to you?" That's that. I honestly think we should probably wrap it up. I have a lot more we could talk about. That's really just the beginning of kind of what I had ready to go in regard to, this network, which truly is North Fox Island and the Spartacus network, because it involves the Oakland County child killer. It involves the murder of Jacob Wetterling. It involves Johnny Gosh, Thank you. Hey, say what now? I appreciate you. Honestly, I appreciate all of you guys. Just, like-minded individuals, open-minded enough, to learn these details, right? So, who knows what we'll talk about tonight on Already Dead. I'll try not to go too dark, but I definitely have a lot of stuff that we could get into, and who knows what Jose's going to bring to the table. Also, I had something I wanted to tell you guys I can bring to the table tonight that has to do with Pizzagate potentially reaching Etsy. Yeah, that's definitely worth having a conversation about. But yeah, I actually am familiar with History Homos for sure. I would love to have a conversation with those guys. Definitely, we should do a crossover episode. I would love that. Yeah, definitely rewind Fire Pixie. We got deep, brother. I don't know. I've had a very strange morning, but I'll check out the Bobo McCoy. You should read The Lawyer that went over some of Trump's executive orders. All right, I will do. I'll check that out for sure. Again, I'm sure we're gonna bring a lot more to the table tonight on Already Dead. So tune in 9:30 Eastern time, either on my channel or No Way Jose as well. Go support both of us. Again, the Patreon's the best place. I will get the email out to the patrons regarding my, migration from Buzzsprout to Spreaker within 24 hours. I'll get it out to you guys with a link and stuff. But I'll also be sending out the link for tonight's live stream. If you guys want to call in or have a conversation, join the conversation, please do, man. We're always looking forward to talking to you guys. So nothing but love, man. Nothing but love for all of you. And I appreciate you guys tuning in and listening to my show. And as I said, I'll have that solo project finished by the week's end is my goal. So and anyway, again, you guys follow me, support me on Patreon at the Underclass Podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Theater Thug AWP or at Underclass Pod, on Instagram at the Underclass Podcast. And man, Sam Tripoli's voice hanging and banging. Hell yeah, brother. Hey, man, I appreciate you, Brian Boswick. Austin is the best. How does he remember all he does? Keep up the great work. I don't know, man. My brain is a strange place, I'll tell you that much. But yeah, as I said, nothing but love for all you guys, man. I appreciate you all, and I'll check you guys tonight at 9:30 Eastern time on Already Dead. Have a good rest of your day.